So, Lone Rider here, and I was reviewing some stuff that I made notes on during the attempts to get mountain bike access at Watchung Reservation, and I came across something that I think is particularly, well, it's indicative of the mindset of many of the people who run local governments and people to support them. And, the fight for mountain bike access is pretty much over at this point, but I think the issue is still there, and it will be there as long as this remains the prevailing attitude. So what I came across was a post somebody put on one of the mountain bike forums. The initial post was somebody just calling for riders to show up at a meeting and thanking them for working on the access effort. The response, however, well, I'll read it to you. It was like looking under a rock. Quote, "Those of you who have been advocating with the Union County freeholders have been pushy, period. The decision-making process is not yours, and you will not get the entire park. Your sense of entitlement is outrageous and inappropriate, as is the behavior of several bikers. If the county gives you anything at all, you are expected to abide by their decision and be thankful for what you get. If you get no trails, you're expected to abide by that as well, and not continue to break the law as some are still doing." Unquote. Now, what's interesting is that, of course, he totally ignores the issue of the fact that the ban was made by the unelected in a backroom meeting, and that whether or not there's a law is an open question. And I would argue it's frankly obvious there isn't. But anyway, he then says in a follow-up post, which is even more strange, he says, quote, "I do not dislike bikers, I dislike lawbreaking, which is what many bikers are still doing at Watchung, despite the new signs expressly forbidding biking on any and all trails," unquote. Now, first of all, he says he doesn't dislike bikers, but I get the feeling that if he were to find out tomorrow that there was no law and the ban is an extra-legal farce, which has pretty much been documented at this point, he still would have a problem with people riding there. I think it's clear that this guy just doesn't like mountain bikers. But beyond that, if he's read the ordinance cited on the new signs, he should know that the word trail doesn't appear in it, that it predates the ban by over 10 years, and that it's about roads, sidewalks, paths, and not blocking cars. And if he hasn't read it, then he shouldn't be talking about what it expressly contains, right? I mean, one could hem and haw, does path mean trail, does trail mean path, does sidewalk mean trail? But the point is, he's not saying it means something that's the equivalent or that we could interpret to mean this. He talks about what it expressly contains, meaning the word's in there, except it's not. Moving on. As to several bikers, he talks about several bikers whose actions are inappropriate. Is he admitting we aren't all bad and that therefore his take on mountain bikers is unreasonable? Or is he suggesting that a blanket ban is an appropriate reaction to misbehavior by a handful of people? Right? I mean, there's no good way to look at that either. Let me scroll down here. I have the computer in front of me. The main conclusion of his initial post, though, is what I think is most alarming. I mean, frankly, if you think too long about this beyond just the issue of mountain biking and you think about its wider implication, this attitude of the relationship between the government and the citizen, you start to hear goose steps, right? I mean, his view is basically that citizens shouldn't be involved in determining the policies they live under, and that they should just take what the government gives them and be grateful for it if they get anything in terms of fair policy. And he seems to think that wanting the government to be accountable and have a policy that's above board and makes sense and clearly authorized by law is outrageous and inappropriate, a sense of entitlement. Now, when I first read this, words failed me. I really didn't know what to think of it. Going back and rereading it now, I'm still at a loss. I mean, my first reaction isn't something that's printable, but it's abbreviated as WTF. I'll leave it there. And his view of the citizens and their relationship to the government, if you want to talk about what's outrageous, that's what's really outrageous here. He seems to think no one should ever question government policy, even if it is unfair or doesn't make sense, and that government shouldn't be accountable to the citizen. He seems to think that the county freeholders aren't our elected representatives at all, but in fact, perhaps rule with the divine right of kings. like what? I mean, seriously. And at the very least, his arrogant dismissal of citizen involvement in government is bizarre and worrisome. I got to be honest, this is a far cry from the vision of self-government and citizen involvement that most people think of when they think of a free country, right? If you look at this just as a mountain bike issue, it's maybe not so bad. If you look at the broader implications of where this kind of view leads, it's not good, right? This person seems to have a fundamental lack of understanding of the relationship between the government and the citizen, the proper relationship between the government and the citizen. And this attitude isn't just offensive. I mean, frankly, it's frightening. I'm going to hope that several of the people that were posting on the mountain bike forum at the time were actually government park employees. I really hope this guy isn't one. I really hope he doesn't work for the government in any capacity, because he seems to have the attitude of a tin pot dictator, which is not what you want in people who work for your government, right? This is just not cool, and I wish more people could realize that ideas and philosophies have consequences, right? And the consequences ultimately are the policies we have to live with on a daily basis and the methods by which they're arrived at. Something like mountain bike access, you might figure, well, it's not really that big an issue. The question I'm going to ask you is, do you think this is the only issue in which this is the prevailing mindset? Do you think that on every other issue under the sun, these people actually have an appropriate understanding of the relationship between the government and the citizen, and it's only on the issue of mountain biking where they think like this? I think the answer is obvious, right? And ultimately, I mean, I guess, the lesson here is that ideas have consequences, and in particular, ideas about the relationship between the government and the citizen, they have consequences for us all. They lead to the policies we have to live with, and a lot of times when those ideas are bad, they lead to bad policy. Big surprise. So, here we have somebody who, it's like, the guy thinks he's like a tin pot dictator or something. And, seriously, as I'm reading this, this wasn't the only person that voiced such ideas. I think the reason I made note of this particular case is because it seems to typify the attitude perfectly. With such attitudes, I don't think it's a surprise that the government screwed over the public, and that the mountain bike access that they'd repeatedly promised for 3 long years, that they even voted to approve a plan for and amended the contract with the contractor, CME Associates, to pay them extra money for it. And then they canceled it, but of course they never re-amended the contract, so certainly they got paid for work they didn't have to do. It's Jersey, right? That sort of thing happens. But it might be beneficial to the contractor, it might be beneficial to the government to not have to revisit the issue and be like, oh, wait, maybe our policy was wrong. But it doesn't benefit the citizens, right? Whether you mountain bike or not, whether you think mountain biking is cool or not, whether you even like mountain bikers or not, the issue really isn't about mountain biking. It's about the government's policy. Was it properly arrived at? Is it fair for all? And is it based on facts? And does it, more importantly, does that policy on this one issue reflect an overall understanding of the proper relationship between the government and the citizen? And if not, you got to wonder how they're arriving at other policies. And you may not care about the issue of mountain bike access, but this sort of attitude of sit down, shut up, and just do whatever the government tells you, and be grateful for anything you're allowed, that's not America, okay? That's not what we're supposed to be about. And if you don't see why that's wrong, you've got issues that go beyond not way beyond not understanding the issue of fair park access for mountain bikers. You've got issues that, you know, I don't know. I mean, I read something like this, and I honestly say to myself, you know, somewhere in some banana republic, a capital city is missing its ruler. That's not cool. Lone Rider out.